Okay, so I kind of want to go ahead and continue our coverage over Kurt Busiek and George Perez's run on the Avengers. And we're going to cover issue number 12. Now, if the video is still too short, I might go ahead and cover issue number 13 as well, because issue 12, 13, I want to say 14 as well, are just a bunch of one-shot storylines that we could possibly bunch together into one video. But issue number 12 is pretty long. And the reason why, because it's the Avengers going up against the Thunderbolts. And yes, you heard that right, the Thunderbolts. And technically, we kind of saw this coming. And let me explain why. Because all of this is coming out of the idea of the Onslaught event. Let me explain. You see, there was this massive crossover called Avengers X-Men Onslaught. Basically, at the end of that event right there, you had this powerful being known as Onslaught be defeated by our heroes. And so you had the Avengers and Fantastic Four run into Onslaught, but been teleported over to the Heroes Reborn reality by Franklin Richards. Now, here's the thing, because for Heroes Reborn, it was really more of Marvel just trying to push those characters away that were no longer selling, bringing in old creators to hopefully fix those characters to bring fans back into Marvel Comics. Now, after 1 year, that plan did not work properly, and you had the heroes come back into the main Marvel universe. And the reason why I'm bringing all that up, because while the heroes were gone, you did have this brand new team appear, better known as the Thunderbolts. Now, we have talked a lot about the Thunderbolts on my channel. Now, technically, we cover the later versions of the team, but when it came to the Thunderbolts, while the Avengers were gone, they were the masters of evil, a group of characters who were well-known villains who were supposedly trying to turn their lives around. And here's the thing, because you also had the idea of the team being led by Baron Zemo, who was also pretending to turn his life around as well. But in reality, he was not doing that, but also half the team was also pretending as well. Now, the other half of the team, they kind of love the idea of being heroes. And so once you had the public find out the Thunderbolts were just the masters of evil, and some of them were still being bad guys in disguise, you had the public kind of turn their backs on the Thunderbolts. Now, again, only half the team was in disguise. The other half said, you know what, let's continue the idea of being heroes. Now, by this point, you also had Hawkeye leave the Avengers and he joined the Thunderbolts. And the reason why, because for Hawkeye, he kind of want to get back in that leader role like he was when it came to the West Coast Avengers, but also he kind of wants to help the Thunderbolts go into the right direction. And so in our last Avengers video, you had the Avengers realize that Hawkeye had just disappeared. But then the morning news, as we get into the opening pages for issue number 12, we see Hawkeye on the news. And when we do, it's really more of us seeing Hawkeye at the moment just hanging out with the Thunderbolts. And so for the Avengers, they're kind of wondering okay, if Hawkeye left the Avengers, why in the world would he join the Thunderbolts? But on top of that, they're also kind of thinking the possibility that Hawkeye is being mind controlled. Now, for most of the Avengers, especially when it comes to Steve Rogers, he believes that, the Thunderbolts are still evil, but not realizing that half the team is really trying their best to turn their lives around, and that's truly it. But while you had the Avengers also trying to contact Hawkeye through his Avengers card, you then have Hank Pym reintroduce Vision. Now, for me personally, this is really important. And the reason why, because for the Vision, he was in the first story arc, but he got severely injured in that story arc. And so he had on the sideline ever since that first story arc. But while he was on the sideline, Scarlet Witch magic was able to bring Wonder Man back to life. That right there is really important, and let me explain why. Because for Wonder Man being back in the picture again, that allows the Scarlet Witch and him to date one another again. And so for the Vision, even though he has been somewhat cold toward the Scarlet Witch in this entire run, at the same time, we get the idea that he is really bothered about how the Scarlet Witch is now dating Wonder Man. Now, he does kind of give us a hint that he does care for her still. And the reason why, because he says, I have not seen you this happy since our trip together for our honeymoon. And so for the Scarlet Witch, she wants to know why did he bring that up? Because for the Vision, it's also him trying to pretend that he is no longer a being that has feelings. Now, yes, he's a robot, but he has been trying his best to move away from the idea of being that robot that had kind of learned how to feel different types of emotions. Now, I do want to go ahead and shift over to Firestar. Here's the reason why. Because for Firestar, we had learned in an earlier storyline that her powers was doing damage to her health. Let me explain. You see, for Firestar, we had learned that with the microwave radiation, it was kind of building a radiation in her cells, of course, damaging her health. And that right there is kind of unique because most of the time for mutants or really any heroes in the world of Marvel Comics, when it comes to someone's powers, they don't usually affect the host. They usually affect the people around them or possibly their target. But for the host to be hurt by their own powers is kind of unique. And so for Firestar, we had learned that her cells were just building up all this radiation. And so for Hank Pym, what he did was he had built a suit that is actually able to get rid of all that radiation in her body, but also help her cells begin the process of protecting her from her own powers. And so for Firestar, she's all happy again about being on the Avengers because of Hank Pym being able to save her life technically. But while you have the Avengers at the moment just hanging out at Avengers Mansion, well, that is when they get the call that the Thunderbolts have been officially located. So we kind of find out that for the Thunderbolts, what they're doing at the moment is trying to find a new base. And so you had Hawkeye take the team over to the old base that belonged to Dominus. Now, we have not talked about Dominus at all on this channel. So, you know what? It's time for a quick breakdown. Okay, so there was this character known as Lucifer, not the devil, a guy known as Lucifer who belonged to an alien race known as the Arcane. Now, for Lucifer, his main goal was to help Arcane take over the Earth. He failed, thanks to the good old first class X-Men. Now, once he had lost that battle and he was sent into a different dimension, over time, he would just reappear and fight against different characters of the Marvel Universe. Like, for example, Iron Man. Now, over time, with him failing over and over and over again, when it came to Arcane, they said, you know what? We're tired, Lucifer, of failing. It's now time for our backup plan. And that was a supercomputer known as Dominus. Now, when it came to Dominus, he was able to take a human form and fight against the Avengers, the West Coast Avengers. Now, you did have the West Coast Avengers being able to defeat Dominus, but you had Dominus leave and went back to the Arcane home world. And so with him gone, the base was just left behind. And so for Hawkeye, this base should be perfect enough for the Thunderbolts to use for the time being. And so while you do have the Thunderbolts begin the process of looking around the place, you still see some of the members kind of telling us, the readers, that they don't truly trust Hawkeye completely. And the thing is, they still feel like Hawkeye is still part of the Avengers. And sooner or later, with Hawkeye being around, the Avengers are going to try to set them up and ambush them to take them in. But either way, while you do have Songbird just flying around, when she goes back outside the base, she's then confronted by the Avengers. Now, with Songbird already assuming that Hawkeye is somebody that cannot be trusted, but also the idea of the Avengers being there, you have Songbird begin to attack the Avengers. And you then have the rest of the team up here besides Hawkeye, and they all begin to fight against the Avengers. Now, as the battle goes on, yet a Scarlet Witch kind of realized something here, that she does not pick up any negative emotions when it comes to the different members of the Thunderbolts. But it's also her saying, like, you know what? Let me go ahead and find Hawkeye. Now, while she's trying to do that, she does find Hawkeye, and you have Hawkeye tell her, like, listen, so They're not bad people, and technically, the reason why I stay hidden so long, I wanted to see how my team would do up against the Avengers. And for me personally, it does seem like my team is kind of able to hold their own against the Avengers. That's pretty cool. But also, we should probably go out there and break the fight up. And so once you do have the battle be wrapped up, you did have Steve Rogers try to go off on Hawkeye about the idea of him leaving the Avengers, joining this team full of criminals, and also the fact that, like, with them being criminals, they cannot be trusted. There's no way these characters are trying to redeem themselves. Now, for Hawkeye, he kind of feels like that's not fair. And the reason why, because for Steve Rogers, he took in Hawkeye, he took in the Scarlet Witch, he took in Quicksilver. All three characters were technically bad guys at first who then turned, to good guys. But it's also Hawkeye saying, like, listen, when it comes to Beetle there, he already agreed to turn himself in. But at the same time, he's also on that path for redemption. And so for Hawkeye saying, here you are right now, assuming, but not trying to understand or at least talk to me to kind of figure out what is really going on. Now, while you do have both parties talking to one another, that is when you have another being appear, and this being is known as Dominex. Now, for Dominex, he was the backup to the backup plan, where basically for the Arcane, if Dominex and also Lucifer had failed, Dominex is supposed to step in and just go ahead and blow the entire planet. And so, while you do have the Avengers and also the Thunderbolts try to work together to fight against Dominex, you have the Avengers get completely knocked out by this powerful robot whose goal is to blow up the entire planet. Now, once you do have the Avengers wake up, they're then confronted by Firebird. Now, Firebird is a character that we have not officially talked about on the channel. And the thing is, I'm not going to do that now. And the reason why, because for Firebird, she's not really an important character for the sake of the story. Just know that for Firebird, she fought alongside the West Coast Avengers when they were at this base last time, fighting against Dominex. But it's also her telling the Avengers that while they were knocked out, Dominex began to walk over to a certain point of the Earth. And that point he's going to is where the crust of the Earth is at its thinnest, which allowed him the chance to blow the core up, which of course will blow the Earth up as well. And so right now you have the Thunderbolts trying their best to fight against Dominex. And so for Steve Rogers, that means the Avengers must get back into the game. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and shift over to the Vision and the Scarlet Witch, because in the middle of their battle, you had a Scarlet Witch wanting to have a conversation with Vision. Now, this conversation is technically really important for her, because for her, she believed that when it came to Onslaught, there was a possibility the Vision had forgotten everything about his past, but also all those different emotions that were attached to those things that happened in the past. But then you had Vision earlier bring up the idea of their honeymoon and how happy she was on their honeymoon. And so for the Scarlet Witch, it told her, you remember everything and those emotions are still there for you. But it's Vision saying, like, listen, over the years, I have caused you a lot of pain, and probably it's best for you to go ahead and be with Wonder Man. But on top of that, Wonder Man do one thing I cannot do, which is give you children. I'm not really human, and he is. So you're probably better off to be with him. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and skip over a few pages and kind of get into the idea of the ending of this battle. And the reason why, because really most of the pages is just our heroes trying their best to find the best way to bring down Dominex. But Hawkeye does got a game plan here. You see, for Hawkeye, he tells Moonstone to appear as Dominex. And remember, Dominex is the backup to Dominus. And so with Dominus being there, quote unquote being there, but also in a human form, for Dominex, he must now listen to the fake Dominus. Now, this won't last that long, but it should allow Tony Stark and Hank Pym long enough to figure out how to bring down Dominex, which of course is the core. And so once you have them find the core, you then have Hawkeye tell the rest of his team, the Thunderbolts, to go out of their way to blow the core up, which of course also blows up Dominex, and he is officially defeated. But the last few pages of this storyline, it's really more of Hawkeye saying, like, listen, I have to do this. I have to go out of my way to lead the Thunderbolts, to kind of bring them over to the side of good, but also show them like what it's like to be a hero. Now, you also have Hawkeye go out of his way to get rid of his Avengers card to show like he is technically breaking his connection to the Avengers for the time being to be the leader for the Thunderbolts. Now, it's also Steve Rogers telling him and also the rest of his team, like, listen, y'all get one chance. As soon as you guys cross that line, me and the Avengers are going to shut you guys down. But you didn't have Hawkeye and his team leave, and that ends issue number 12.